Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Info Tap. I'm glad you made it. I've done a few videos on the change of rule from the VA and the kind of back and forths with it, the intervention from Congress, specifically the Senate, pushing on the VA with regard to how they are looking to basically reduce the amount of money that they're willing to pay for ambulance services for veterans, which is a horrible idea on many facets. And I'm not going to relive all the prior videos that I've done on this specific subject, but I did find a new article, and I wanted to read this to you. I'll bring you up to speed here with this, and it's important for us to understand the dynamics of kind of the back office workings of the VA with regard to the services that we are receiving, right? Heaven forbid that you have to get air transported or take a long ambulance ride somewhere and get stuck with a bill or something like that. That would be horrible. So let me read the headline for you here. The headline is VA delays change to how it reimburses veterans ambulance services amid fears for rural providers. So based on the headline alone, it sounds like the VA's getting the message and they're feeling a little bit of the pinch here. This rule, if I remember right, and I hope it says it in this article, I think it was supposed to go into effect first quarter of 2024. So it sounds like they're reeling it back a little bit to figure it out. So again, another bad look, in my opinion, for the VA. Hit the thumbs up for me, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. It helps out immensely. If you really want to help get this information out, let the video play. Tells YouTube to send it on to more of us. That's the biggest thing you can do. If you want to additionally help, being a member is a great way to do it. And also it helps me to find you faster in the comments. All right, jumping back into the article here. All right. The Department of Veterans Affairs has postponed planned changes to its ambulance reimbursement rates. And I'll tell you this, right? I like to think this, even me and you working together on these types of videos and hitting the thumbs up and sharing and watching and all of that stuff, because it doesn't mean anything if nobody's watching it. So I'm putting it together, you're watching it, you're sharing it, that type of stuff helps to float it up and get more attention. The more eyes on it, the better. So when an organization is hearing things from congressional elected officials, and they're seeing it from the public side, and they're hearing it from the American Legion or the VFW or Order of the Purple Heart or what have you, that's pressure, right? So the more avenues that we can create pressure, the greater the pressure becomes, if that makes sense. So thank you for watching this and sending it on. So let's jump back into it. A proposal that was to go into effect in February. I was going to say February, but I changed it to the first quarter. So yes, first quarter, February. Despite concerns from the companies that provide air and ground transport, this would be the ambulance services, and veterans who potentially will be affected by the change. In response to a 2018 VA Inspector General report that found the department paid roughly 60% more than Medicare rates for air ambulance services, the VA announced earlier this year it would change its structure for reimbursing ambulance companies in an effort to address the difference and be good stewards of taxpayer money. Let's move on here. The change was to go into effect on February 16th, 2024, but the VA announced last week that it would delay the change until February of 2025. So we got a year in change. In an announcement posted on the VA's website, officials said they were committed to changing the rates, but also would ensure that veterans would not receive bills for the services. That's the important piece, right? Who's going to get stuck with it? The veteran, right? So let's move on here. VA will pay the lesser of the actual charge associated with an air ambulance service or the standard rate for that service, unless a separate rate has been established based on local contracts between air ambulance providers and local VA medical centers, officials wrote. VA intends to include terms in these contracts to ensure that veteran care will not be adversely impacted. Industry representatives and members of Congress have raised concerns that the change would translate into a reduction in reimbursement rates to the Medicare levels, a move that could negatively affect veterans who live hundreds of miles away from an emergency room. In a recent interview with Military.com, Ben Clayton, a former Marine Corps pilot and CEO of the nonprofit ambulance company Life Flight Network, said companies rely on receiving the market rate from the VA and commercial insurers to cover their cost and provide services for all patients experiencing emergencies, including Medicare and Medicaid patients, veterans, and the insured. I'm going to kind of re-loop in there that this guy is the CEO of a nonprofit. So it's not like they're raking in the dollars. It's a nonprofit, right? Of course, he's probably paid well, and so are his people. But you know what? I kind of would like to have well-paid people coming to my aid when I'm in the most dire situation. That's just me. Just saying, I don't want the discounted person rushing to my aid. All right. So let's move on. He said an ambulance provider in a rural county in Montana ceased operations as a result of reimbursement shortfalls, and more would likely follow if the VA reduced reimbursements. So now that community has to wait for an out-of-county ambulance or rely on volunteers to try to get the life-saving care the communities need, Clayton said. Clayton's company serves Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and western Montana, covering roughly 322,000 square miles. That's a lot. Speaking in the National Press Club earlier this month, the VA secretary said the goal of the new rule was not solely to reduce rates. Instead, he said it was intended to encourage providers to enter into formal contracts with the VA for services. That's almost funny. Because that was never really said anywhere. But sure, it sounds good on the back end, So why are you doing this, VA? Well, look, the goal was not really to reduce the rates, you see. It was to encourage these providers to come to the table and get into a formal contract with the VA, you see, because we're really looking to take care of you, the veteran. I don't know. Sometimes the way people say things, it's just annoying. All right. The way the VA pays for emergency ambulance services put at risk taxpayers' interest, the VA secretary said. VA alone among healthcare systems in the country pays for each individual ambulance cash. We are just paying cash for each run. We cannot find another hospital system that does it that way. Earlier this year, lawmakers, including Chairman of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, John Tester, and Senator Moran of Kansas, the committee's ranking Republican, pressed this VA secretary to delay the rule change. This is what I was talking about earlier, while the VA undertakes outreach with industry and individual companies on the contracting process. The two have introduced legislation along with Senator Patty Murray and Senator John Boozman that would bar the VA from reducing rates unless it can guarantee that the change would not reduce veterans' access to ambulance services. In a statement Wednesday, Tester praised the decision to extend the rule. The availability of emergency air and ground transportation services in Montana and rural America can be the difference between life and death, Tester said in a statement. VA's hasty implementation of its rate change for these services could have been the final straw for providers in rural America, and I'm glad to see VA answering my call and taking steps to fix this reimbursement issue. So, glad, happy, we got another year, so it's not gone, it's just postponed. So, I encourage you to reach out to your elected officials and let them know, yes, the VA has extended, put a hold on this rule, but they're still looking at doing it. I want to make sure that we are protected as a veteran community. That would basically be the message, and just put a little pressure on those electeds. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you. Have a great one. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.